Thank you, everyone, for joining us for this very special event. My name is Liel Leibovitz. I'm a senior research fellow here at the Hudson Institute. It gives me tremendous pleasure to introduce a man who requires absolutely no introduction. My teacher, rabbi, and I'm proud to say friend, truly one of the greatest intellectuals, writers, filmmakers, but also a person who shows up, who bears witness in person in a way that we don't do anymore and need to do. And this latest book, which packs more into 150 pages than most of us other writers will ever achieve in thousands and thousands and thousands of volumes, contains multitudes. And we have a lot to talk about, and I would like to turn this into a conversation. So I'm going to start with a pretty vague question. I want to start on a more personal note, because whatever else this book is, it's a work of philosophy. It's definitely a work of geopolitical analysis. It's definitely a work of sort of spiritual guidance. But it's also extraordinarily personal, because you wake up to the news on October 7th, and a day later, probably one of the first Western journalists there, on the ground, you're there. Tell us, what do you see?
Yeah, I think I might even have been the first, because on the ground, if you mean in the devastated kibbutzim, I was probably the first. It was on, I arrived in Israel, I decided to go on October 7th, the very day when the horror happened and got to our ears. I took the first possible flight for Tel Aviv, which was not an easy task, because all companies canceled their flights. El Al was full of brave reservists coming back to fatherland to defend. Private companies, companies of private planes were not authorized by the control tower of Tel Aviv to land. It was a real mess that day. So I arrived the 8th. I was the 8th at night at Sderot in the south of Israel, and I was on the 11th in the kibbutzim. So when I arrived, there was still, ashes were still hot. Jewish bodies had been buried, but there were all over still bodies of terrorists. In black, the skin was blue and black under the sun, with des fourmis, how do you say des fourmis? Mm-hmm. Ants starting with a blue bash over their body. It was, and Jewish pieces of corpse around, non-attributed pieces of bodies, which the organization Zaka, with whom I was also, did collect the sacred task to rebuild bodies before give them a human, decent, and Jewish sepulture. And there was still some ambushes in the kibbutz, for example, Kfar Aza. There was still some terrorists alive who tried to give the last shots. There was a smell of death, of devastation, of interrupted life, a charming life, charming house, rooms of babies, toys, all of that petrified as if by a sort of barbaric and savage Pompeii, This was the feeling. And some survivors who were eager to speak, who wanted to speak, to bear testimony. Survivors who saw the worst. Families killed, wife or sister abused, and so on. So I did collect. Zaka collected the pieces of bodies. I collected the pieces of memory. And I decided to write the book. The decision really took place at this very moment. On the 11th of October, I made to a gentleman and a young lady the oath to write that, to write what they said, to tell to the world what I saw, and to try to understand what happened. And I promised them to try to describe also the world into which we were entering, because I immediately felt that we were entering in another world. We, the Jews, we, the Israelis, we, the Jews, but we also the free spirits of the free world and the free spirits of the non-yet free world. We were entering in a new time.
So I want to ask about that. You write in the book that you almost immediately understand that this was a capital E event. And you write very beautifully that the capital E event is this black swan occurrence that cuts history in half. It has, you write, no past, but it has a terrifying future. So as we look at the world in the aftermath of October 7th, thinking specifically now about the geopolitical challenges that we're about to face or are already facing or understand now that we are facing in a way that we didn't before, what kind of world are we looking at?
A world where freedom is lonely and dictatorship are numerous and allied. First characteristic. Freedom alone, I mean that the title of that book, Israel fights for freedom, fights against radical Islam, fights for free Palestinians also, fights for all the cursed and wretched and martyrized people in the earth, and they are alone. This is, by the way, the difference with the previous fights against radical Islam. When America did fight Al-Qaeda, America was not alone. There was a strong coalition with America. When France did fight another form of radical Islam, another variety, which was ISIS, we were not alone. We were well surrounded. There was some Arab countries with us. There was America with us. I remember I was in Mosul shooting one of my movies, which you know, and I remember the Iraqi soldiers, the American planes, French instructors. There was a strong, deep, well-built, proud coalition. Third stage of the same battle, Israel is alone, nobody at the side. Of course, allies, but allies who say, strangely, by the way, allies who say, come on, Israel has the right for self-defense. Israel has the right to defend. When you think twice, the right to defend is the minimum which any country of the world has. Right. What no ally of Israel for the moment says, and which would mean that they are really coalesced with Israel, is that Israel has the right to win. The other day, one of the candidates of the presidential election said that Ukraine had the right and the duty to win, which was great. I was very happy for that. I was very happy. It's one of the combats of my current life. For me, the battle of liberty, of freedom, there are two front lines, Ukraine and Israel. So she said that. Ukraine has the right to win, and we have the duty to make her win. Then I waited. About Israel, she said, Israel has the right to defend. So on one side, we have Israel alone. On the other side, and it makes it all the more paradoxical, by the way, in front of this Israel alone, we have a coalition of tyrannies unprecedented, which it was the reverse. We did not exist at the time of ISIS or Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda was alone. There was no state supporting Al-Qaeda. Nobody in the UN said that Al-Qaeda was defending resistance. Nobody dared to say that Al-Qaeda was a liberation movement. Nobody. Al-Qaeda was alone. ISIS, same. ISIS was cursed by everybody in the world. Nobody did even think about, how do they say, making a ceasefire with ISIS or a compromise. Nobody. Today, Hamas is officially supported by a great, big country and great by culture, which is Iran, supported by, in a way of leadership from behind, by another big country, which is Russia. Hamas has been praised immediately, celebrated by another big country, which is Turkey. On October 8, when I was in the plane to Tel Aviv and Sderot, Erdogan delivered a speech when he praised Hamas, and I could quote many others. So the situation geopolitically is an Israel alone against an Islamic movement which is stronger than it has ever been, and which, on the contrary, gathers a coalition around it, with the other one did not. So it's paradox to the max.
You saw this coming. I think 2 books ago, if I recall, you wrote a book called The Empire and the Five Kings. And I won't do it justice. I really highly recommend everyone to read it. But basically, the argument was, as the empire, which is the West, sort of recedes for a whole host of reasons. And this is, of course, an allusion to the biblical story of Abraham, who had to fight 5 potentates to save his nephew Lot. You say the new 5 potentates, the new 5 kings, the new 5 tyrants are China, Russia, Iran, Turkey, and the sort of global movement of Islamism. Explain to us the rise of this coalition and how this current conflict really shines a spotlight on the dangers that they present the world.
The coalition is totally counterintuitive, because these 5 blocs historically hate each other. They have archaeological quarrels between them. Ottoman against Persian, Arabs against Ottoman, Chinese against Russia. I remember when I was young, I could not even imagine Russia and China, with all the past, the wars, the 2 communist patterns, coalescing one day. It happens. So they are divided by very strong oppositions, but nevertheless, they are totally allied. And the incarnation of this alliance, the focus point, is today Israel. They are allied against Israel and supporting more or less Hamas. That is the situation. My thesis, two books before, as you said, my thesis, I built it, the empire and the five kings, the reluctant empire of America, more and more reluctant, which is in a way a good thing, but in a way a bad thing. When you are in front of bad guys, it's not so good to be reluctant. So the reluctant empire in front of five kings, offensive, taking advantage of the recession of the empire. I built this thesis when I built it, I had in mind my experience with the Kurds, the Kurdish people. It was verified, this thesis, by what happened in Ukraine, and it is the apotheosis of the verification is what happened with Israel. So this is the geopolitical situation, and it's we French, we Americans, but not only, we Uyghurs, we dissidents of Russia, we Friends of Liberty in Turkey, we women in Iran, we are facing a block of countries who represents, honestly, an unprecedented force. It's much stronger than they are more stronger than the old, frozen, zombie Soviet empire. It's really concerning, and Israel is in the middle of that, at the center of that.
The thesis being that as they did in Ukraine, as they did in Israel, they are attacking and counting on the fact that we will not necessarily counterattack or fight to win.
They observe the reluctancy of the West to stand with their own values. They observe our growing difficulties to be proud of what we have done and to be proud of our creed. They observe the signs of recession, of retreat, which we give, and they move forward. It began, if you have an overview of a situation, the whole story began in Iraq and in Syria first, and in Iraq with the betrayal of the Kurds. We used the Kurds against ISIS, and when they became useless, when the victory over ISIS was accomplished, we did drop them flat. It was the first signal sent to Erdogan, sent to Bashar al-Assad, sent to whoever. Then there was a second sign. Here is my Kurdish friend arriving. Then there was what happened in Afghanistan. Same. It was a sort. It was no longer a war. It was people here in these countries speak about the endless wars. It was a war getting to its end in Afghanistan, and an end which was a victory. I was there in Afghanistan a few months before the departure of the last American troops. There was since 2 years, no military operation. The Taliban did hide in the remote villages and went out only at night, like owls. Mm-hmm. The women were more and more numerous to unveil their beautiful face. The civil society was building itself. A free press was blooming. This was Afghanistan. And suddenly, to the big surprise of the rest of the world, to the disarray of the Afghan people, and blessed by Russia, China, and so on, America decided to recede. America decided started to negotiate with the Taliban. Why? Who? What was the emergency? To gather in Qatar, in Doha, and to discuss with the Taliban. There was no deaths, thanks God, no American deaths since a certain time. There was no military operation. There was a few thousands of American soldiers in their barracks, and the fact that they were there was enough to deter, to oblige the Taliban to keep underground. And we decided to move. This was the second signal. Then the third signal was Ukraine, again, and America. And understand me well, I love America. I'm the most pro-American intellectual, maybe.
The most pro-American Frenchman ever.
If not Frenchman.
Since that other one who traveled this country. Yeah.
But again, the whole world heard the president of this country announcing that there will be a war, announcing that he had good intelligence that it will burst, but speaking as if he were a news agency, like if he were Bloomberg, it will happen. So what? And nothing. So, of course, another bad guy, Putin, felt emboldened and moved. And the absence of reaction at the beginning, after that there was a reaction, of course, but never at the level which was required. America in Ukraine, this is another story, but acted till now as if the intention was to prevent Ukraine from losing, but not leaving Ukraine winning. That's why not lose, but not win. That's why I was so happy when I heard the other day Ukraine has the right to win. And all of that, step by step, of course, gave a sort of go to the coalition around Hamas, which means to Turkey, to Russia, to Iran, to Yemen, to North Korea, to go on Israel and to launch a final attack. And if Israel does not prevail, or if Israel is obliged to compromise, or if the arm of Israel is twisted, and if Hamas remains in charge in Rafah or in part of Gaza, the next target will be Taiwan. I can grant it to you. The next target will be Taiwan, step by step. So this is the geopolitical situation of today. And of course, sometimes the reluctant empire wakes up. I remember Biden, I wrote a piece in Tablet, the Biden miracle. A few weeks after the war started in Ukraine, a few weeks after Biden saying that if it was only a skirmish, it was okay, he will not move. He took a child in his arms. He was visibly, obviously moved to tears, and he said that Putin was a butcher and that the great America was back. So from time to time you have that. When Israel is rained by missiles and drones, you send your best porte-avions, your best, strongest vessel, and you protect Israel. So from time to time, there is a reaction. But this creates a very strange climate of uncertainty and of unprevisibility and of danger. And we are in a very, very dangerous world now.
Before we turn this into a conversation, I have two more questions. And the first goes to an analysis from my colleague here at Hudson, Michael Duran, who explained that the key foreign policy of the Obama administration and the Biden administration was what he called the realignment in an article in Tablet with Tony Badran. Basically, the belief that President Obama and President Biden after him had that some kind of detente with the Iranians, lifting of sanctions, negotiations, will reshift the balance in the Middle East and create some kind of situation in which the Iranians are ascendant. Eventually, they'll modernize or moderate themselves, and therefore the influence of the Saudis and the Israelis will be kept at bay. When you look at American foreign policy these last, 15 years, what do you see? What went right? What went wrong? And what should the next president, whoever he or she may be, do to rectify the situation? Only that.
Two unforgivable mistakes in the last 15 years. Three. First one is the Iran deal and the naivete to have believed what you very brilliantly, as always, described. I agree 100%. Second mistake, to betray your allies, to abandon your allies. This is a basic law, not only of geopolitics, but of life. You don't leave your friends back. When they are wounded, when they are under attack, you don't leave them back and you don't go home. I will never forget my friend Neshirvan Barzani, at that time Prime Minister, understanding the day of the referendum that he was on the process of being blockaded by Iran, Iraq, Syria, with probably no reaction of his allies. Really, it was a heartbreaking moment to see this brave man, Neshirvan Barzani, inheritor of the bravest dynasty of Peshmerga, himself a great fighter, understanding that it was left in the battlefield alone, after having shed the blood of 8,000 of his brave Peshmerga. I will never forget that. I will never forget the young Massoud in Afghanistan. Massoud, after, again, great family line, the son of Ahmad Shah Massoud. I met him a few months before the betrayal, and I hear his voice on the phone on August 16. He could not believe. He was manhunted by the Taliban in the city of Kabul, trying to make his way to the airport with no ground support, or very little support given by personal friends guiding him from far, from safe house to the airport. So the second mistake is that, betraying your friends. This is unforgivable for any country, for France, for America. And the third mistake of America is of another sort. It is a geopolitical and metaphysical mistake. That's my opinion. It is to have started a movement. It's not isolationism. Isolationism is a regular mistake of America. It's like a pendulum. From time to time, America forgets what it is, and besieges itself inside the walls of the fortress. But something new happened maybe in the years of Obama, which is to look more and more West and less Europe. And there is between America and Europe a bond of life, a bond of gold, a sacred bond. America would not be America without this link with Europe. The program of America is, the DNA of America is Europe resumed. The program of America is Europe again, and Europe better. This is how and why America was founded. America was founded by Europeans in despair when they saw what Europe was becoming with the wars of religion and so on, the fire, blah, 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 intolerance. And they decided to take vessels with the Bible, the Torah in one hand, and Virgil in another hand, Virgil, Aeneid, and they decided to go and create a better Europe. And America, who would totally forget this metaphysical and spiritual roots, which will forget the Torah and the Aeneid, would be lost. Of course, you have to look west. You have to make business with Asia, no question. But not at the cost of this metaphysical linkage. And this is probably the third mistake of the last 20 years.
So we're saying, make America Europe again.
That's exactly what I think.
One,
and then it will be great.
One more question before we open this up, and it's always a good idea to end on a low note to make sure everyone is feeling a little bit sad and depressed. So let's return to Israel, and it's facing incredible difficulties right now, as you write in the book. On the one hand, it has to win this war. It has no choices, even though it may not enjoy the support that it ought to have enjoyed internationally, even though it has so many challenges, it just must do it. On the other hand, you write very movingly, it must also fight in a way that at no turn neglects the tragedy of the human cost of this war, nor allow itself to sort of spill into a situation in which it forgets its basic commitment to the ethics of waging this war according to international law and Jewish tradition. What should Israel be doing right now? What would be a victory it could look forward to?
First, the Jewish tradition and the international law, Israel, till now, respect them. Besides being trying to be a philosopher and a writer, I have always been, since my youth, a war reporter, and I never saw in my life, in my entire life, an army waging a war, and even more, an existential war, by being so cautious about civilian casualties. I never saw an army sending warnings saying we are going to bomb tomorrow. It never exists, nowhere. And it could even be considered as a tactical and a strategical mistake, you know. So Israel does that, sends message, gives warning, begs the civilians to evacuate. When they are prevented to evacuate, escorts the civilians. I have, in the book, I have documented some cases, and I have even more of what I described. So for me, there is no question. War is horrible. There are casualties, of course. And but Israel could not act really better than it does on this field. It can always be, of course, better, but not significantly. And the purity of weapons, the terror check, the international law of Geneva, all that is, I think, on the table of every officer of IDF. To win the war, there is no choice. If Israel fails to topple Hamas, to topple really, not only to destroy the armature of Hamas, the skeleton of Hamas, but military capacities, but really to put them out of affairs in Gaza. If Israel fails that, Hamas will remain, will get out of this war, victor, champion, heroic, new hero, not only of Gaza, but of the Palestinian people, who deserves honestly better heroes than that, and of the Arab world in general, and maybe of the suburbs in France, and so on and so on. So there is no choice. The world prays, but alas, silently, Israel to win this war. It's a necessity. What victory means? Victory means what it meant against Hitler, what it meant against the Taliban in 2001, what it meant against ISIS at the time where they had a nearly state, a quasi-state in Raqqa and in Mosul. It means capitulation. Capitulation. In front of these sort of guys. And when you have to face a total war, the only outcome is capitulation, not compromise, not ceasefire, not negotiation. This means nothing in this sort of situation. When you have a regular war with a real target of war, okay, but this is not a regular war. This is a war when one of the actors and all his supporters want the annihilation of the adversary. The Palestinians, they don't ask the farms of Sha'aba in the south of Lebanon. They don't ask for Gaza, they had Gaza. They want what? Palestine free from the sea to the river, which means eradication of Israel. No compromise with that. And certainly not a compromise, again, that would mean a reinforcement and heroization of the force for genocide, which is Hamas. So no possibility for another outcome than total capitulation of Hamas. And if an America and a France, faithful to themselves, would do all their best efforts not to make pressure on Netanyahu. You can think whatever you want of Netanyahu, but honestly, the emergency is not to make pressure of Netanyahu. Emergency is to make pressure on the states, the countries who have an influence on Hamas to compel them to surrender, to capitulate. This would be the noble stake for an administration in America, to press Qatar, to press Egypt, for them to press Hamas by all the means which they have. And they have a lot. They have a lot. The Hamas is a puppet in their hands, and in the hands of Iran, of course. So this would be the real job, which I recommend.
Amen, Selah. I think that deserves an applause like nothing else. I have about 4.5 hours more of questions, but since I know your time is very precious, let's open it up. Please.
Hi, thank you so much for coming. My question is if you could talk a little bit about the relationship of the rise of anti-Semitism that followed immediately after October 7th, when the natural inclination would be to think that people would be more sympathetic to Jews and Israelis. Instead, we saw the opposite. And in that same vein, do you think that the fact that the Biden administration, I know you're supposed to be nonpartisan here, but that doesn't apply to you, I think, that fact that the Biden administration pressured Israel behind the scenes to slow their mission down, for example, when they wanted to be on the offensive in Rafah early on, and they were, told to not do that, if you think that fuels the flames of anti-Semitism?
The great Emily Hamilton, by the way.
Second question, I replied to Liel. This is difficult to understand, but America did push and still push Israel for a compromise, a stop in the operation, which is suicide. Suicide for Israel, suicide for Jordan, suicide for the Palestinians themselves. I read a poll this week saying that 94% of the Gazans today think that Hamas is responsible for all their misery. So if you ask Israel not to enter in Rafah, it means that you go against the interest of these 94% of Gazans. So this is an absolute mistake of America, which is probably the follow-up of the three mistakes we evoked with my friend Liel Leibovitz. About your first question, again, I can only confirm your feeling. We all expected, or at least I expected, I don't know you, but I expected a movement, a real moment, and a lasting moment of sorrow, sympathy, compassion, solidarity with the victims of the pogrom of October 7, with the women who had been raped and murdered in the same time sometimes. And we had the opposite. We had articulated teachers in great campuses, great universities, making videos where they explained that October 7 was a great day of their life. We had brilliant minds like Judith Butler explaining that Hamas was a brave movement of resistance. We had the same in France. We had worse in France. We had a very big party embodying today the left, having swallowed most of the French left, and saying that they understood, they sympathized with Israel, no, with Hamas. So it is as if an old anti-Semitism, which was encapsulated in our history, which was contained by the forces for dignity, for republic, for democracy, which suddenly, like a gin out of a bottle, took advantage of the destabilization of the moral disorder, of the metaphysical disorder created by the pogrom, to unleash themselves, to develop themselves. It was the opposite which was expected, but it happened. It happened that far from creating this movement of revolt, October 7 liberated the forces of hate against the Jews. And another battle started, which finds people like us and like you again on the barricade and on the same side, which is a battle against the renewal, the comeback of anti-Semitism. It was unexpected, but it is a situation. And we have to wage this fight, this moral fight, this fight for intelligence, this fight for wisdom, and we have to win it. We have to win it. There is no choice. In France, some are thinking of leaving France. I respect their choice, but it is not mine. It is not my choice. France is a country which was built in part by the Jews. No way to leave it. And no way to leave it to these morons, illiterate, very un-French, who to be anti-Semitic is to be un-French. To be anti-Semitic is to be un-American, honestly. And to be racist, same. So it's another fight which is imposed to us, which we the Jews, we the Friends of Liberty did not choose, but we have to wage it and to win it. Sir?
May I ask you a simple question that isn't being asked, and that is, Israel is a democracy. How will the democracy of Israel today evolve to preserve any capitulation of the terrorists and preserve its democracy in that location?
To preserve democracy in Israel, democracy is preserved in Israel. Democracy is more alive than ever. If you see, I don't know, I was in Tel Aviv recently at the out of Shabbat, Saturday night, on Hostage Square. Again, I saw many wars in my life. I never saw in a state of war so vibrant demonstrations of protest against the government who is in charge of leading the war. This is a proof of democracy which is honestly incredible. And a prime minister who accepts it, please or not. So this is democracy. When a member of the family of a sister of Ismail Haniyeh, the former, the killed, the dead now, chief of Hamas, who is an Israeli citizen. I don't know if you know that Ismail Haniyeh had some sisters who live in Israel and who are Israeli citizens. And when they have health trouble, they are cured as any normal citizen in the hospital of Beersheba. It's normal. You don't deserve a medal for that. But Winston Churchill, when he got at war with Germany, put in jail without any discussion all the possible partisans of Hitler, all the members of the fascist party of that time, all in jail without any trial or discussion, and they remain in jail for the whole war. The sisters of Haniyeh, they are not in jail. They probably don't deserve. They certainly don't deserve. They are cured at the best hospitals. If there is a suspicion for one of them, there is suspicion of contacts with Hamas. They have a lawyer who explained that it is not true and who is pleading. It will go to Supreme Court. Democracy is more alive in Israel in this state of war than in France during the war in Algeria, or maybe America at the time of Patriot Act 1 and 2 after September 11. No, democracy is safe.
Zeynep, you, and then I'll take the privilege and ask one final question.
Hello, thank you very much for joining us at Hudson today. I just have a question which is very linked to anti-Semitism too, which is the spread of the colonial ideologies. I obviously saw that in France, but also in the United States, and it's all very subversive. A lot of it is Iranian propaganda, but I was wondering, how do you think we should fight against it?
The best way to fight, I think, is to... I am a decolonial man. I am an anti-imperialist man. I did fight all my life against imperialism, but I say that today fighting against imperialism means to fight against Turkey, Iran, Russia, China, and Qatar. This is the real deal for a decolonial mind. If you want to decolonize the world, this is what you have to do. Not to fight against the ghost of the French Empire, not to fight against the ghost of British Empire, which exists only in the books, great books of great English writers, of Kipling. No, the real stake today, if you are a real decolonial mind, is to fight against the five kings. This is the stake.
One final quick question. She'll take you just 15, 20 seconds to answer. You are so much more spirited and optimistic than many of us are. Many of us look at ordinary citizens, for example, in France, who vote for Jean-Luc Mélenchon because it's some kind of protest, because it's some kind of expression of discontent. Many of us look at state and universities and say, wow, if our universities have fallen, if reason no longer stands, if we could look at GoPro documentation of these atrocities and claim that never happened or that's Zionist propaganda, then truly all is lost. You don't believe it. Tell us why and tell us how we win back hearts and minds.
Number one, I don't believe it because I believe in truth. I don't believe in relativism. I'm not a Nietzschean philosopher. I don't believe, like Nietzsche, that there is as many truths as there is persons. I don't believe one man. I believe one man, one vote, but not one man, one truth. This is the real difference. That's why when I see the GoPros of the jihadists, I say that's the truth. I don't say, no, that's their truth. And then we have their truth. No, this is the post-truth theory. This is a full bullshit which has been fed by the right and by the left equally, and which is a plague of our time. About this left, which I didn't know what you said, revolted. I think the opposite. They are submitted. I am against them because I am a true liberal in the English, in the American sense of the word. I am a true leftist. I am really convinced that to be a liberal means to oppose with all your forces the tyrannies. The French party which you mentioned, the France Unbowed, this is their name. in reality, they are bound. They are submitted to, when Mr. Mélenchon is the name of the chief of this party, when he is asked what he thinks about Syria, 500,000 deads, okay? The country emptied from half of his population. He says, Bashar al-Assad did a good job. Quote, Google, ChatGPT, whatever you want, good job. When he's asked what he thinks about the war, the imperial war of Russia against Ukraine, he says, propaganda, and if it is a propaganda, it is the responsibility and the fault of NATO. It is the fault of America. They provoked Russia. He takes side with Russia. When he's asked what he thinks about the Uyghur and about the Chinese imperialism and genocidal acts, he said, I don't care. And I don't care about Tibet. And I don't care because this regime, even if it is not perfect, is in the good side of history against America, etc. So I am against these people, not because they are leftists, but because if you try to give to the words their real sense, if you don't accept to become mad, or these people are reasoning, thinking as the worst extreme alt-right, the extreme right, submission to dictatorship. Same for Venezuela, this guy Mélenchon, I'm sorry to insist, but it's my country. He loves Maduro. He is convinced that Fidel Castro is a hero for him. Comandante Che Guevara, he believed that. So there is a sort of reversal of the political signals, of the meaning of the words. We have entered in a sort of Orwellian world, and there is an emergency in Europe, like as in America, to step out the Orwellian world in which we are.
For your courage, for your wisdom, for this book, for joining us today, Bernard-Henri Lévy, thank you so much.
Liel, thank you very much.